developing their country. And a few examples of multilateral institutions are United Nations organizations, the World Bank, and MDHO. So, and bilateral aid is when money is given directly to poor governments from donor governments, okay? So, first of all, what is our stance on side government? Why? So, we want all the money given from donor governments, we want all of it to be channeled through this. We all want all of this money to be channeled through multilateral institutions as opposed to be given directly to these poorer governments, right? So moving on to my argument, why do we think this is so important? Why do we think that we have to channel it through multilateral institutions? So currently, the reason why poor countries are poor in the first place is because they have corrupted governments, or governments that do not know how to self-suffice themselves and how to actually manage their money, right? So when you put a third party into the situation, when you put these multilateral institutions into the equation, it actually creates more checks and balances in this whole process. Because currently, when you have bilateral aid, when the money is given directly to these poor governments, you have the donor governments don't actually check that these recipient governments are using all that money for the developmental aid. Because we see right now in status quo, most of the money that is given to these poorer countries are actually being exploited by the leaders of the country and aren't being used for the intended purpose, which is the development of this country. However, when you put in a third party, when you put in these multilateral institutions, what you're doing is that you're ensuring that these poorer governments are using the money for they're using the money for its intended use, right? But how can you prove that these multilateral institutions are actually doing their job? Because the reason why we can prove that these donor governments don't check that the recipient governments are using the money for its intended purpose is because these donor governments, they have their own country to run. Their main purpose isn't to help these poorer governments, right? However, we see that with a multilateral institution, their main purpose, and just a note that they are non-profit organizations. So their main purpose, their sole purpose, is to help these poorer governments. So they have no reason to be corrupted. They have no reason to take any money for themselves because, as I've said, they are non-profit organizations that their sole purpose is to help these poorer governments, right? So we see that when you put in this third party, and there are more checks and balances, and you ensure that the recipient governments aren't exploiting the money that is given to them, right, through these multilateral organizations, then we see that when there is less corruption, when there is more transparency in this process, there is more development, which is inevitably our ultimate end goal. More development for more countries, right?
Yes.
Before I move on, yes.
Yes, do you support US sending safekeepers to Haiti?
Can you
Miss, do you support the United States actively and independently engaging in Haiti by sending their own safekeepers rather than sending it through UN?
Okay, so I understand what you're saying here. When a certain country is doing all they can to help another government, right? However, the reason why we want multilateral institutions to step in and help is because we see that these donor governments, for example the US, right, they have their own countries to run. Their sole purpose isn't to simply help these poorer countries, because at the end of the day, all we want is to ensure that these poorer governments are getting the developmental aid that they need, right, and that they are able to develop in a way that can best suit them, right? So, but when you allow these when you allow these multilateral institutions to step in, when you actually enforce the policy that they need to step in and actually help, you're ensuring more help for these poorer governments. Because we see that these donor governments, even though they help as much as they can with these poor governments, their sole purpose isn't to help these poorer governments. So you can't expect them to simply devote all their time and all their purpose and all their money just to help this poor country. However, when you have when you have this multilateral institution stepping in, not only you have more help channeling through this poor country because these multilateral institutions devote all their time to helping these poor countries, right? But we also see that you can actually gain more money when you have a multilateral institution. So, but before I move on with my point, yes.
We feel that it is important for this poor government to be independent in independent assessment of issues and problems so that they can be developed.
Okay, so whilst I agree that it is important for these poor governments to be self-sufficient, I think that self-sufficiency only comes when these governments are actually in a right state to be self-sufficient, right? And I think that this self-sufficiency only comes after they are being helped and developed by these multilateral institutions. Because, as I have mentioned before, most of these poorer countries are poor because they have corrupted governments. Governments that don't know how to make sure that they are actually developing their country in the right way, right? So, back to my point before that we go on. Why multilateral institutions actually gain more money for these poorer countries? Because multilateral institutions allow multiple countries to donate to the multilateral institution, so that this institution can actually trickle down the money to this poorer country in a way that would best help them in development. With that,
Alright, thank you very much, Prime Minister. I'd like to invite the opposition leader.
So on side of winning opposition, we will tell you how that this international aid will go directly through the government on their own, and how we'll tell you how it will use the international aid will be used for its purpose. Will be directly given to who needs them. So before I move on, I would like to present a few rebuttals. So the side of winning government, it tells how that the main purpose of a government is to help their own country and so on. But we think that the main purpose of NGOs itself, like United Nations organization and so on, they also have their main purpose. They also have their main goals to achieve. So we think that we shouldn't burdenize those people furthermore, because we think that because the government have the responsibility to do it. So in our speech, we'll tell you how that why bilateral aid is more effective, and why if this motion rise, it will further introduce more problems when we channel it through it will furthermore introduce problems. So our stance into this debate is that we believe that in this debate it has to we need to bring a sense of normalcy, because we think that it is an urgent matter in today's debate. So moving on to my first point, which is the role of government itself, which I think it should be the government should say this. Because why? Because the role of government itself is to help the people, right? Because we think that we shouldn't shift the burden of the government towards these NGOs to help other people. Because we think that it is the responsibility of the government itself, and we think that when this happens, people will lose. People will lose all the society. Will lose the government will lose the trust of the people that they owe their duty to. So on the second level of analysis, we think that why is it the role of government? Is because only government have information towards these people who need this international aid, and how they can recognize these people who are in need of the international aid. No, thank you. So we think that when government only have this information, we shouldn't let the government to divulge the information towards this corporate, towards the NGOs, the United Nations organization, the World Bank, and so on. Because we think that because we think that we don't think that this organization will have the incentive to do so, because we think that they also have their own focus. Even if their focus is to also help those people who are in need, but we think that because some of these organizations, they have their main purpose, so we think that we should shift the burden of the government towards this organization. Before that, yes.
But then why should we burden the donor governments who are already donating money to these countries? Why should we then burden them to make sure that the money is actually being used for intended purpose?
Because this government, the government that are willingly to help to give international aid, of course they want the international aid to be used for its purpose. So we don't think that if we only let this government to channel this international aid to this NGO, then we think that it will probably cause more problem, because then we don't know where the money goes. We don't know where the international aid or any international aid goes. So we don't think it is efficient to give it to the international into the NGOs and organizations and so on. So no, thank you. So moving on to my second point, which is how when we only let government to handle this, it means if you only let bilateral aid given directly to recipient government, we believe that it will be never biased, because when we send the international aid directly to the government, to the recipient government itself, so we don't think that things like misusage, things like manipulation will happen. So let me tell you how this will happen. Because as I told you just now, that these NGOs, that these organizations, the United Nations organization and so on, they have their sole purpose. They have what they want to achieve. When they started the organization, probably of course the World Bank has their own purpose. I mean, like a goal that they want to achieve. So we don't think that when we let the NGOs to handle this international aid given by a government, we don't think it will be used. It will be used for the purpose of it. We don't think that. We think that probably manipulation can happen, or probably they won't even give this international aid to the government, to a country that are in need of this. No, thank you. So we think that if we send it directly to the recipient government, we think that it will be used for the right purpose, because the government itself, the recipient government that receive this international aid, they know their people, they know who are in need of this international aid. We believe that bilateral. That's why we believe that bilateral aid should be given directly to the recipient government, because it will be used for the right purpose, as the government knows who are the people that are in need. So before that, yeah.
Okay, so, but most of these poor countries, the reason why they're poor is because they have corrupted governments. How can you ensure that these leaders aren't going to exploit the money and take it for themselves?
Because they got the international aid itself, and they feel that not all government are corrupted. There are some government who are not corrupted, and because they get the international aid, and they also want their country to become more better. Of course, if you use the international aid for the right purpose to achieve something for the government to move out of that. How people would think that this government, this country is poor and so on. So what I told you in this debate is how that is the role of government to channel this to give directly to a government, because it's their responsibility. Because we think that when this happen, no misusage or manipulation to happen on our side. We believe that the people who are in need of the international aid will get what they really needed. So with that, I would like to close my case. Thank you.
The House thanks the opposition leader. This House would now like to recognize the Deputy Prime Minister to present his speech.
We live in a world that is full of corruption in poorer countries. We live in and where like the governments of poor countries want to try to support themselves before they go towards their citizens. So what we see is that if we have like bilateral aid where we give the donations directly to the government, we see that this government wouldn't use these donations to help the citizens, but instead they will try to use it on themselves. So in my speech today, I'll be bringing you a few things. First off, I will rebut a few of the things that the leader of opposition has said, and I will give you a few arguments. So first off, on a few rebuttals. So the opening opposition came up and told us about how only the governments have information about the people who need this aid. But we see that this is like this in a way can be it can be sort of a good thing, as we see that these multilateral institutions will cause the governments of the poor countries to in a sense become more become sort of transparent, and we see that this is a benefit not to the country and also the citizens. I will be explaining that later on. But next, when the opening opposition also mentioned about the fact that manipulation may happen in these multilateral organizations. But the thing is, what we see is that these multilateral organizations are organizations where people are constantly watching. It's not just a government, but countries all over the world is able to monitor what these will be able to watch and monitor what these organizations are doing. So the fact that manipulation may happen is very unlikely. So on to my a few points. So my first point is on the fact that obviously corruption would be a problem if we use bilateral aid in status quo, because you see, if you use bilateral aid, we see that especially if this aid is going to go to poorer countries, will go towards countries like Africa or some countries like that which are in need of help. But the thing is, with countries like these, you would see that the government is most likely going to be corrupt, and the governments would most likely wouldn't use the donations to help the citizens, but rather keep it for themselves. And so we see that the only way to combat this is that we should allow the international aid to be channeled through the multilateral institutions, and no thank you, be channeled through these multilateral institutions rather than actually giving it straight to the recipient government, where there's little chance of monitoring what they are going to do with the donations. So next, when previously I mentioned that the multilateral institutions will cause these governments of the countries to, in a way, become transparent. So why is this good? So we see that if these governments were to become transparent, what we see is that it will empower the citizens of the country, and we see that this is a good thing, because obviously, in a way, this is one of the ways in which you can combat things like corruption. And so, in a way, this yes.
Giving it to multilateral institutions would mean that they will try to help as many countries as possible, which means that they prioritize quantity over quality. How can you promise that the service or the aid that they give to that certain country will be good, useful, or long-lasting in the very first place?
Okay, look, we do understand that they will prioritize sort of quantity over quality. Well, we see that international aid doesn't just come from one country, and it doesn't come very little. It comes from many countries, and it comes in usually larger sort of amounts. And basically, even if split, each country is still able to, each nation in need of help is still able to receive a sufficient amount to help development and also to help improve the conditions in the country. And we see that, and another thing we see is that, with bilateral aid, you're gonna give a country sort of a lot of donations at one time. You're not going to give little by little. You're going to push a large amount towards these governments at one time, and we see that this will cause these poorer governments, the governments of the poorer countries, to sort of not be like they don't know what to do with it. They feel like they receive a lot, but they don't know like how to spread it, how to distribute it, and in a way, sort of how to use this to benefit the citizens. So there's a higher chance of them just keeping it and only benefiting themselves. Whereas if you channel it through a multilateral institution, what this does is these multilateral institutions, they know how to handle large amounts and they are able to handle these sort of things, and we see that this will allow them to distribute these donations fairly, and also we see that these multilateral institutions are going to be able to distribute this between the people who are really in need, rather than towards the governments, which will keep it for themselves.
Thank you, Deputy Prime Minister. Let's call upon the Deputy Leader of Opposition.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah.
So, Madam Speaker, let me clarify to you what is international aid is about in today's debate, right? So, basically, international aid is not about sending foods or military assistance to only poor governments, right? So, we believe in our side, we believe that sending international aid, including sending military assistance, food aid to poor countries, and also countries in crisis situation, natural disaster, and whatnot, right? So we believe that in our side, we believe in independent assessment of issues and problems, because we believe that it is a quicker process for these countries to get these aids rather than to go with multilateral institutions, right? But before I move on to my points in today's debate, I will give a few rebuttals, right? So firstly, they talk to us about how government are all corrupted right now, because that's why they are poor. But we believe that not all government are corrupted, but they are not having the chance to independently assess their problems in today's world. Because why? Because in today's world, they are too depending on international bureaucracies, right? That is why their development does not happen in their country. Why? Because there are no such thing as empowerment of local accountability, and we believe that that is the roots of for this country to not be developed at the first place. And Madam Speaker, we believe that in crisis situation, right, we have to bring the sense of normalcy quicker, because we believe that imagine, Madam Speaker, in a crisis situation, you need food aids, you need clothes, you need military assistance, and your safety are in jeopardized, right? So when these kind of aids are being channeled through multilateral institutions, there might be some problems that I will tell to you after this. So, but before that, yes.
Well, when multilateral organizations are actually supported by multiple different countries working together, don't you believe that this would actually be a better way to help countries in a crisis situation?
So we believe that yeah, they are being supported by what numbers of other countries, but we believe that it is not a problem into this. It's not a thing that matters most into this debate because we are afraid of ignorance of issues that the local, the government itself who are receiving this aid will do at the end of the day. Why? Because we believe that when they are keeping on getting international, keeping on having they are keeping on having international aid from multilateral institutions, they will sign volunteers and whatnot. We believe that these government are likely to be corrupted in their side. Why? Because they are ignorant of issues. They are not. They are too depending on international bureaucracy, right? So, Madam Speaker, we believe that even if the government will monitor this government will monitor this country who give international aid and whatnot, we believe that their side actually say that this government might be corrupted and whatnot, right? So we believe that even though this government will monitor these multilateral institutions giving aid, we believe that in today's debate, the problem is not that. The problem is that we have to bring a sense of normalcy because in today's debate, Madam Speaker, we believe that reaching important constituencies to this in this country who needs help is important. Why? Because we believe that the only one who have that infos of this country who are in need of help is that country itself. So why we want to expose this kind of information to other institutions, right? Sit down. So we believe that the problems that will occur through the process of giving international aid through multilateral institutions, not bilateral, right? We believe that these food aids might not reach the important constituencies. Firstly, because there might be problems with the borders lines of the countries, right? Because not all countries are opening their gates for any institutions to enter, right? Because there might be political issues between between these NGOs and multilateral institutions, right? So we believe that in crisis situation, we believe that the world most isolated from other sources. We need to bring that sense of normalcy because even if they are we are talking, even if they are talking about the poor, right? We think that they are also in crisis situation, so that's why they need quicker settlement and not just waiting for false hopes that might expire at the end of the day, right? But before I go on.
Alright, so assuming countries do have conflict with other countries and close off their borders to not get help, in our world, wouldn't they open up the borders even more if they're in crisis and need the international help?
So, Madam Speaker, we believe that they might open that gates, right, Madam Speaker, but they might have to go through meetings, agreements and whatnot. So we believe that is not a quick process for them to give international aid, because we believe that aid is something you need in a dire situation that you might die one day, right? So we believe that when you directly giving to the government itself, you are trying to you are letting this government to set. Firstly, you are letting this government to settle their problem itself, and independent assessment of issues and problems will happen at the end of the day, and it will settle more problems, because what I said just now, I also believe that this government, they know the influence of their countries, they know the important constituencies that they have to settle at the first place, not by only relying with the multilateral constituencies, right? So, Madam Speaker, we do not want to in our side, we do not want at the end of the day, these multilateral institutions are getting the blame, are seen as the blameless agents of benevolence, right? We don't want them to take the bad names that they are using this money in a wrong way. So, Madam Speaker, we believe that this money should be channeled and directly channeled to this to the country itself, because we believe that it is a quicker process of settlement. So from that, I would like to urge you to oppose.
7 minutes 19 seconds. Perhaps time the opening half of the debate. Moving on to the closing half, we would like to now invite the member of government.
Here.
This debate so far has been really messy with the opening houses, because both opening houses had extreme assertions. Open government assumed there was always corrupted government, while opening opposition assumed that countries always will fulfill their roles. Side closing government with the first thing in this room to clarify what's the actual thing that's most likely to happen and what's the reality of the situation. So the first, I would like to point out that this debate cannot only happen in a corrupted government context, it can also happen in a world of which governments in developing countries cannot help, can't manage their money properly, don't have proper management of distribution towards different sectors of finance, right? Secondly, I would like to point out also that it's untrue that all countries will feel that fulfillment, and it's true that some countries are corrupted. So then we can say and conclude that opening opposition can assume that government is always benevolent and will always comply to their people and always try to fulfill their role. With that being said, in my speech I'll do a number of things. The first, I'll rebut opening opposition. Secondly, I'll present two arguments. The first, why providing aid bilaterally is harmful. Secondly, why multilaterally providing aid is more efficient and more impactful. But for that, let's just talk about the rebuttals. So the first, opening opposition assumes that the reason why we should always continue giving directly to these governments, because these governments are the individuals that know their people the best and have a lot of information. I would say this is untrue for multiple reasons. Because if it's true, if your assumption is that World Health Organization cannot collect data and World Bank cannot collect data from these countries, I would think it's false, because these institutions already do it in status quo. They intervene in countries and help them with the current problems, both in in major crises and both in developing nations. Right? This means those organizations do have the ability to intervene and know what's actually happening in the country, or else they wouldn't be an institution in the first place. Correct? Secondly, we think that open opposition also said that the government is more effective in handling developments because they have an active incentive and will always try to fulfill their role. False. I don't think this is true, because governments are more often not profit incentivized and more often have some malicious intent to provide them with some benefit, right? And we think they tend not to care about the people and only care about staying in power, so they offer people some benefits to keep them in power. But even if they can manage their money, even if they do try to fulfill their role, we think that they can try to fulfill their role, but they can't try being better at managing the money and resources that they have. And that's something opening opposition completely forgot in this way. Thirdly, there was this POI from closing opposition about how these institutions care more about quantity over quality. I think this is false, because one, obviously when you help a lot of countries, you have an incentive to help them more efficiently, or not people blame you for not helping them have a seat. But secondly, even if it was straight, they only care about the quantity and not care about the quality, that's still fine, because the comparative is, at least they're taking care of these countries that couldn't help themselves. At least there's some sort of resources they can use to allocate to helping these countries. Lastly, opening opposition had this whole ordeal about being too dependent on international help. I think that this is false, that we're always trying to assume that they always will be reliant on international help. In fact, I would say that they're more likely to rely for international help, try to manage and allocate their money properly and govern their countries properly. But even if it was true that we are always too dependent on international help, I think this is fine, because it's a trade-off, right? We will trade off our dependency, we will be dependent on this institution if it means that our country is more stable and our people don't suffer. Before I continue, Afiq.
So if it's true that government often want to stay in power, hence they are corrupted, what do you do under your side to solve that? Given that those who stay in power usually hinder any aid that international bodies give, or it harms it?
I think as the government, you have duty. Even if you want to do the obligation, you still have to stay in power, right? If you don't do it, you'll be voted out. This means there'll be some acceptance of it, right? Because if they don't accept, your people suffering who will vote it out. So yeah, that's how the question. So the first argument, why providing bilateral aid is harmful? I think that developing countries more often aren't able to distribute and allocate their money properly. This is because they are unable to prioritize the money or unable to allocate it efficiently. Either because they lack the amount of investment, so on and so forth. But I have to point out the reason why these countries cannot do these type of things is because they are literally countries that need this international help. With that being said, I think it's fair to assume when you need international help, you are seriously screwing up your country and you need some help and intervention to happen. B, what are the negative impacts of this? One, we think that absence of proper management means that your economy is likely to fail. This means your economy becomes unstable. The middle class stops and your economy just thrives, or just stops and capitalists rule your country. The point here is that at the point at which your country becomes, your economy becomes unstable, MNCs have no other options but to leave. This means when MNCs leave, the purchasing power and money circulation within the country tends to decrease, or has some stagnant effects on it. And the reason why that's harmful is because if those companies leave and there's no proper circulation or sufficient amount of money being flowed, we think that your people are more to suffer, right? Because your SMEs can't function properly with a proper economy, your MNCs are more likely to leave, then your people will suffer because they can't afford a lot of things because the purchasing power is really low. So that that comes back to those people. Lastly, how will multilaterally providing aid is more effective and more impactful? We think we need to analyze who are these individuals and how they do their work, right? We think these are people like the World Bank, where they manage money, have proper knowledge of how to manage money, count money, and so on and so forth, and World Health Organizations that have some sort of knowledge in the health department. This means if they're able to, if countries are able to give their resources to them and allow them to give back to these countries, they're more able to do it more efficiently because they have the knowledge. The comparative is the countries doing it by themselves and failing or less likely to succeed. We think that countries that need international help are more likely to use it more efficiently and sufficiently if they have some sort of guidance. Considering that your economy is really failing and you need international help, we think that you're screwing up one way or another. You need guidance, right? The guide that we provide is this UN organizations and institutions. They are incentivized to always help you because it's their duty.
Alright, thank you very much. Let's now have member outside opposition.
Being moral is one thing, but trying to be moral and rational at the same time is another thing. We get that everyone wants to help a country, but here's the thing. When multilateral institutions are actually the ones in charge of help, then what they're going to do is only help people on the ground achieve a thing or so. What they're going to do is never in the aim or in the outcome of trying to achieve the country's full development. Because you also concede to the fact that they do it quantity over quality. You concede it to a lot of things. How these multilateral institutions are there to help you, to help the country in ways where they can I don't know, have some form of social mobility at the end of the day and things like so. We tell you that all of the claims that side government has made from the very start is definitely false. Firstly, I'm going to be doing a couple of things. Number one, rebuttals. But secondly, I shall tell you specifically social mobility versus the nation's development, what actually happens with it. But secondly, what will happen when you do not give money to the government and how that's in itself is already a bad thing. But firstly, rebuttals, right? So under opening government, we describe them in two manners. Number one, they were being assumptuous, but secondly, they believe that money is not a problem. They believe that international aid is something that's forever lasting and things like that. They believe that they will never face a point in which the money or the foundations, the aid that we have will come to, a halt or will come down somewhat later or whenever, right? We believe that, but secondly, we also think that it is unnecessary for them to believe that a government can just, completely misuse the money when they themselves don't even have money to begin with, and things like that. But even if this government actually misuses the money, they will be smart enough to use it in a way where they can get more money at the end of the day. Which means that they will do some form of development and then take the money. But we think that even if this happens, we still have counter purposes as to how we can avoid this from happening later on. So opening opposition told you what is the role of the government, thank you, and why it's good and things like that. On the our side, we carry a different perspective, which will be elaborated on later. Alright, coming on down to the side of closing government. We think that this is the side that is too nice and does not actually recognize how international aid through multilateral means is actually something that is bad. We tell you that because you have conceded to the point where quantity over quality itself is a bad thing in itself. Understand that, sure, people in Africa and Sri Lanka now get access to clean water, but that help is not absolute, nor is it whole. It means only a few or a very short amount of the society will be of access towards these helps and things like this. So, as much as you help them, we tell that that form of help is most likely useless at the end of the day. That form of help will only build a good reputation for you, but never actually help the people in that country to progress or to develop and things like that. Just because they get clean water now, it doesn't mean that that clean water can last forever or things like that. But secondly, don't thank you. Just because they get clean water now, it doesn't mean that they themselves will finally go to school and things like that, because they don't necessarily have the direct incentive to do all of the other things that can help them develop as a social worker or even as a country. Alright. So next is how the last two things is about information and also independency. We don't think it's a problem of information because we have both agreed that both sides have access to information. But secondly, about independency, we tell you that your side can never achieve independency because the help you give is not necessarily as a whole or absolute. At the end of the day, no one under your side or none of the people that you help will be actually helped to its fullest extent. Sure, they get water now, but it doesn't mean that they get enough education. It doesn't mean that they get everything that they need in order for that certain country to progress. We believe that the word guidance Rifqi used is another word for dependent, right? Interesting. Alright, no thank you. Okay, social mobility versus nations development. Here's the thing about prioritization. NGOs don't prioritize development, they prioritize three things. Number one, they depend quite heavily upon social views. Secondly, morality matters more to them than outcome. But thirdly, they also carry out some biases. For example, Bretton Woods, who supplies monies to countries that are able to assist the West later on and things like that, right? So the help that they give in the first place is never absolute. But then, we do also believe that multilateral institutions are able to misuse this money. It doesn't differ much from government doing it and things like so. Alright, so sure, they help society get tangible things like food, water and shelter. They help society become more mobile with their lives. But it is not forever, as I've said before, right? So, but then when you do not give money to government, the first thing that you're doing is you fail to recognize that this government and this specific nation are able to actually progress as a nation at the end of the day. You deny them their rights of progression because you still blame them for not being able to help their people. That by the sense of you giving their people help, you're telling them that you are as though you are the government of that certain nation. That this government can never provide for their people and it is their fault that all of these things happen. No, thank you. Okay, so you can't, alright, so the reason as to why we think that it's absolutely important to give money to the government instead of multilateral institutions is because number one, you can properly understand how that government misuses or uses the money to begin with. You can actually recognize what happens with the money when the money is given to them and things like that. Before opening.
How can you ensure that that bilateral aid will actually differ from multilateral aid when it comes to dependency?
Okay, well, we tell you that bilateral aids more often than not come conditionally, right? Like we tell you that you cannot misuse it, we tell you that you cannot use it for certain matters and things like that. We tell you that we have many policies and safeguards in order to ensure that bilateral aids aren't misused at the end of the day and things like that. We tell you that when a government is given the direct obligation and responsibility to actually cater to their people and to ensure development happen in their nation, then we are able to take up political action when those things don't happen. Then we will finally have someone to blame because currently, as much as you see those governments are corrupted and things like that, more often than not, you don't have any premise to base that assumption out of. So we tell that in order for you to ensure development that is long-lasting happen in the very first place, you have to give it to the government. You have to ensure that the government is capable of, managing the money right. Sure, we tell you that just because you deny multilateral institutions for this multilateral aid, it doesn't mean that these multilateral institutions will be left with no funds at all. We tell you that multilateral institutions will still have funds at the end of the day and will still be able to help those countries to get whatever it is that they want, to educate them on how to finance their money and how to actually build the country upon certain methods and things like that. But it is so important for government to be given this right and to be given this opportunity in the first place. If you don't do that, then your country will never be able to progress. When you fail as a government and you don't have any opportunities or any know-hows on how to base that assumption out of. Thank you.
Take care.
Just talk for 7 minutes, 8 seconds. Thank you very much. Let's now have the last speaker from side government. I'd like to invite the government whip.
The money that states give to countries who are in need is a very noble act that can help a country immensely. But if there are other countries in the same state, countries which have citizens who are suffering, and countries where governments aren't able to help their citizens because of the situation they're in, we say independency doesn't matter and we would rather help these countries that are in need. 3 questions in today's debate. Firstly, who is better able at providing development? Secondly, who will be able to provide independency and is it important? And thirdly, which is better, bilateral or in multilateral aid? First question. Firstly, who is better able at providing development? 3 levels under this. Firstly, what is the development in status quo? Secondly, what does development with multilateral institutions look like? And thirdly, is a quick process the best process? First level is what does development in the status quo look like? The development that they have been telling you about is development that isn't very sustainable. They normally just dump money into a country and hope for the best. They normally try to ask these governments to make sure that they're probably going to do something that's good. Even if you say their money, that these people won't use their money, even if you say that you do have policies and other things that it will make sure these people use their money to the best fulfillment, it isn't very sustainable because you just dump them with this amount of you basically just drop them this budget on what you don't know what to use on. So it isn't a very sustainable method because you don't know what they can do with it. And secondly, the second level, what does development with multilateral institutions look like? We have organizations that have lots of data, like things like WHO, the World Health Organization, that can help stop epidemics from actually happening and stop diseases in their country from happening because they know the data and how these epidemics become a reality. Secondly, we also have institutions like the World Bank, which have a lot of data on economics and how people go into like the Great Depression, for instance, on how people don't have or they go into some type of drop where MNCs don't go into it. So we feel that they are the best individuals or the best institutions to provide and stop these things from happening and making sure that this development is sustainable in the long term and just sustainable at all. And thirdly, is a quick process the best process? Opening opposition was telling you about how a quick process is necessary for these countries. If there are multiple countries out there with the same problem that these other people are having, we feel that developing all of them at the same rate is something that's quite beneficial. Having a quick process benefits one country. Developing multiple countries at once can help nurture a great region where when you do develop countries accordingly and they do grow at the same rate, they can invest into each other because they know the situation that they're in, and it just creates this region that is very good and can help the process of these countries develop much more faster. Because the quick process isn't necessarily a great one. Because when they say quick process, we don't know what that means.
maybe they'll get independency faster. What does independency mean when they don't have a sustainable living in that economy? Meaning that there aren't MNCs in there because they probably dropped out because they know that this country isn't sustainable whatsoever. They haven't invested in the type of infrastructure that is necessary for this country to survive. They haven't invested in the type of routes like roads to just make MNCs have efficient transportation to these type of shops within the city, have a seat. So we feel all those things and quick processes don't really mean anything if you haven't developed the infrastructure, or you haven't developed anything. You don't have banks, you don't have any MNCs, you don't even have SMEs in your country. We feel that quick processes mean nothing because the type of development you have isn't sustainable whatsoever. That's something. Second question, who will be able to provide independency? Three levels under this. Firstly, is independency important? Secondly, is there what is their solution and what is our solution? Firstly, is independency important? Independency, like what you're talking about, they say that independency is important because of multiple reasons. How independency can secure a country's economy. Economies take a great amount of time to build. And if you say that independency will fix an economy and will just make it a great country in general, we feel that it's false. There's a lack of analysis coming from the other side. So we feel independency isn't very important. And even if you say we do secure independency for these countries, we feel these other countries, even if we don't secure independency faster for them, or we haven't even secured independency for them, at least they're developing at the same rate, at least they have some type of clean water, and that's at least one step further than what they can get, because all these other countries at the same time is something that's better because at least they're growing at the same rate, meaning maybe better education, for instance, or maybe more people in that country get an education. In your side, one country gets a better education and gets clean water, while these other countries suffer, and that short-term benefit that you were talking about can be a long-term harm, because that long-term of you trying to grow this one economy can be very harmful for these other countries who have been suffering for years already because you've been just focusing on this one country. That isn't very beneficial for anything. We feel independency doesn't matter on that side.
So will you give credits to nations that has the ability to independently assess their issues and problems? Will you consent to give credits to nations that are independently assessing their problems?
Yes, we will, because that's just good for them, and they have secured a sustainable economy because they are able to be independent by themselves. We aren't saying independency isn't wrong. We're just saying independency isn't necessary and isn't important at this current moment in time. We feel that independency can come, but it will take a long time. And we feel the long term that side closing government bills is a long term that is sustainable for countries that are needed. So yeah, so their solution about how independency is important and them building one economy in general is not very good, because it's too long for one country to get a good economy while others suffer in the dust. Third question, which is better, a bilateral or multilateral aid? We will say that throughout these two questions, that multilateral aid is the best aid that we can possibly give. Developing countries at the same rate, and therefore creating a region where countries are able to invest in each other because they know that they're in a similar type of situation, is a situation that is good, and this region that is sustainable. So we feel if you want a sustainable economy for multiple countries and not just one, go inside closing government.
Thank you very much. 7 minutes and 5 seconds. Let's have the last speaker of this debate.
Can you off the live stream?
Yeah, I do consent. Is it Panel side O entered the debate by saying three things. The first, international bodies often are biased. The second, governments in need are poor because of multiple reasons, not just because of corruption. And the third, governments can change. These are all the matter coming from my first speaker that was never dealt with any matter coming from government bench. The reason this was important is because it shows how selective both teams were. Uji, let's tackle them first. Not only that, there were various assumptions. 4 assumptions. The first, countries in need are only corrupted. There's a lot of reasons why. Sometimes countries face natural disasters or maybe civil war like in Yemen. Even if that wasn't the case, there wasn't reasons to believe why their countries under their side wouldn't self-collect. Because we told you why countries on the outside were forced to be transparent for multiple reasons. The first, bilateral agreements are usually conditional. So US will have an incentive to make sure the aid sent to Haiti will come back as an investment to begin with. So there's safety nets. So if they weren't transparent to begin with, it means they won't get any money, or it means that the US usually does this, the fear of them militarizing to begin with. The difference with UN bodies and other international bodies is usually they aren't violent, and a lot of countries know that. That's why countries like in Yemen that sometimes get multilateral aid, sometimes don't care if they use the money for other reasons, because they know that UN or other international bodies like WHO will come in and stop them from doing such. The comparison on the outside is we have independent countries that have independent military that could really mess you up, right? Going into your countries, they have done this before, for example, in Haiti. Second example is that donor government has no incentive to directly help, hence we need to use a third party. This is factually untrue. It goes against all headlines of US being involved, independently giving aids and back soldiers in